Welcome back, everybody. Oh, sorry, I refreshed the page. Next up, we have Rod Little. Welcome, Rod.
Hey, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. So Rod is a solutions architect with a passion for data and business transformation, and he discovered Tableau way back in the dark ages of 2010. So that's quite a while back. And he hasn't looked back. So he's talking about dashboard design with your audience in mind. Welcome, Rod, and over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. This is my first Fringe Festival, so I'm excited. I've listened to some of the talks today. Amazing group of people that we have. So I've only got 20 minutes, so I'm going to get to it and start sharing. All right. Hopefully, y'all can see my screen okay. Yep. So I want to talk about dashboard design with your audience in mind. So I'll go ahead and just give a brief background about myself. I was born on Earth, like hopefully most of you were. Graduated college, stumbled on the Tableau in 2010 while working at Cisco Systems as a business analyst. And it's been a success story ever since, I'm sure, as most of you know. Just a big background. So who I've worked with in the past is Georgia Pacific. Families First is a nonprofit here in Atlanta, Georgia, a passion of mine. Coca-Cola, ADP, Cisco, and currently I'm doing consulting work for the IRS. So, and before I start, I want to talk about this book right here. It was the first book that I ever read on dashboard and design. So I came from an Excel access background. So this book it's an older book, but it's a good primer. You can read it in like 30 minutes. And it's just got some really basic, nice tips on design ethics and things when you're adding bar charts and lines and things like that. So if you ever have a quick read, I mean, it's a great book. I mean, some of the speakers have already gone in depth about design, but this is something that really helped me when I first started. So what I want to talk to is the types of audience that you're going to have to design for. So I'm a consultant. I've been consulting for 10 years. And the groups that I've consulted with they typically fall into a bucket of about 3 different folks. You've got your very high level executive C-suite, right? So less is more. They want key performance indicators, KPIs, or key business indicators, as some people call them. Very simple, very to the point, right? Because they don't have the time to digest lots of information in most cases. The second group that I typically deal with the most are like your mid-level managers. So there's a happy medium, but 9 times out of 10, they're used to seeing an Excel report. So you've got to be very gentle with your design and build in some tables and things like that to kind of keep them okay with the design. You don't want to overwhelm them. And the third group, which is my all-time favorite group where I get to go crazy, are your analysts or your power users. These are your data hogs. They want as much data as you can throw at them. I've met one power user who, on every report I designed, they wanted a 10-year history so they could go in and look back a 10-year pattern. Why? I don't know, but that's what they wanted. So in my experience, I've gotten to see all these different managers, these different executives, and kind of get a feel for the design of how they want. So whereas previously there was more of talk on the design ethic, this is more on like the audience themselves, and especially on the business section. So, I have a high level approach when I design for an audience. And this is, again, we only got 20 minutes, so I kind of narrowed it down. And so it's basically a 3-phase or 3-iteration approach. One, I like to build the dashboard. There's whiteboarding and wireframing, obviously, but I like to build it just to kind of familiarize myself with the data, right? So I go into a company, I've only got, a week or so to kind of get familiar with the business, get familiar with their data, get access. So I want to kind of build something quickly just to see what the data looks like, what the relationships are, and then really get a feel for it. And so that first iteration really is to present to the client, right? To present to them and say, hey, this is what we're kind of looking at. What are your thoughts? Because the goal is not just to answer the question as a consultant, right? Because anyone can come and answer the question. The goal is to introduce them to questions they didn't know they needed to be asking. And that's how that's how you come back. So that first iteration is really going to be about, again, familiarizing with the data. The second iteration is going to take that client feedback because they're going to say what they don't like, what they didn't know they needed, right? And you start polishing it some more, you polish the visuals up. And then on top of that, you want to add some more functionality, right? Some dynamic filtering, all those bells and whistles that Tableau is great for. And then by the third iteration, we have what I like to call the real version 1, right? This is the one that's probably going to get published. Your users are probably going to get access to it. And that's the one that's going to start that feedback loop where you're going to start doing that iterative approach to design. So I'm going to show you 3 different versions of dashboards that I built over the years for 3 different audiences. The first one, and we're going to go, you're going to see why I'm laughing in a second. The first one is going to be a slide for a manager. So this actual dashboard helped save Georgia Pacific $1.3 million forecasted for, I think, 2018, the year 2018. And it was based on their training analytics. So a little bit of background, they were an older company, and the way that their training program was that anyone could assign anyone any training. A accountant could assign the CEO an accounting course. A sanitation engineer could assign an entire building, work ethic, you name it, right? So they needed a way to kind of hone in and rein in who was taking what training for how long, and then who was assigning it. So I'm going to tab over and show you guys this dashboard. So as you can see, the colors that I picked are Georgia Pacific's color, which are like a light blue, a white background. And I designed it to be very simple, right? You only see there's maybe 4 or 5 real visual elements on here. And everything's of course dynamic. And I made sure to keep it very simple, right? So a dark blue to a lighter color, a lighter blue is, from greatest to least, because this is all about counts. There's no red or green here. 1, because of color blindness, and 2, the audience was only looking to see about who was taking training and how much. So there was no good or bad, right? And so I could easily come in here and I could click on this particular product and then choose this particular segment, and I can see the counts and the training over a period of time. I got a rolling total. But more so than anything else, they could come here and see what facilities were having the most training, because Georgia Pacific is a manufacturing facility, right? They're a manufacturing conglomerate. So if your facility is having training, that training should really be more so about safety, maintenance, and security. And so they were able to deep dive into here and see that some of these facilities were taking courses on accounting, on you name it, anything that didn't have to do with that, right? So how do we save them $1.3 million? Well, after we produced this, we had some of the other analysts come in, right? I built this again for them to do some deep dive analysis with. The analysts came in, started projecting hours, and realized that if they were able to reassign the training regimen between the people who were designed to have it, i.e. your HR staff, maybe some team leads, versus the way that they were doing it before, which we call the Wild Wild West, the number of hours reduced in overall training based on 2017 and 18 and 2019, that dollar amount saved about $1.3 million. So oftentimes as developers and as consultants, you don't necessarily get to see the monetary value of your work, but in this case we did. Now, the caveat here is that this wasn't just for one particular audience, right? This spanned across the entire business segment. So as I began to develop this, some of the managers that have been there for a long time, 30, 40 years, were not used to this kind of visual. So we had to build a second dashboard to append to this. And that looked like this. And they loved it. I mean, they fed off of this one because it was very simple. As you can see, it's highly tabular. And one of the things that I learned in consulting is that if you tend to have those who are coming from Excel based or even Access, or that have been there for maybe a decade or more, the visualization that we're used to now can be overwhelming for them. So you want to design something that is familiar and that slowly bridges that gap into having more visual and more analytics. So in this one, they could come in here, and again, very simple. They could do a top 10, top 100. They could see totals at the top on the year-over-year differences, 2018 versus 2019. And this one, this one was put together rather quickly versus the other because, again, it was just for that particular audience that wanted to see that. So the other one I want to show you guys is, this is one that I did for a nonprofit here in Atlanta called Families First, and it's very near and dear to my heart. But the request was for power users. And I'm going to show you the first iteration, and I'm going to skip to the final version. So the first iteration was just, again, to get a feel for everything. And you're going to, it just looks ugly, right? And that's okay, right? Your first iteration doesn't have to be pretty. So you can see here, similar style to the first one. These are their programs. So I can come on a program, I can click that program and just get some functionality, right? Just to see the female versus male demographic, their age, income, some counts, ratios, things like that. But nothing too fancy. And I broke this out into 4 parts. So you've got iteration 1, iteration 1 part 2, iteration 1 part 3, which I'll be honest, I don't remember what this is. And iteration 1 part 4, because they had 4 different segments. So I was working with their CTO, I think at the time, and he says to me, Rod, I want this to overwhelm the audience. I want this to overwhelm the users. I was like, who are the users? He said, these are going to be our benefactors. These are going to be our board of directors. These are going to be people that, give us money. And I want them to see where their money is going, but I also wanted to overwhelm them. So he wanted me to take their annual report, which I think was about 80 plus pages, take as much of that data as I could and stuff it in a Tableau. He wanted to present it to overwhelm them so that their analysts and their assistants could go in and do a deep dive into the client analysis to see where the money was going, who was using it, how are they benefiting from it. And so I took that into heart, and over several iterations later, we took this into this. So you can see it's nearly a completely different dashboard, right? I incorporated in their business colors. Looks like I got the female still filtered on. There we go. I incorporated their business colors. I incorporated some dynamic drill downs, I like to call them, so parameter actions, so they could come in here and they could switch between different metrics, and you see everything dynamically changes. I even changed the metrics here so you can change it from your client counts to even household income. So now I can see if you're employed, full-time, what percentage are you, and then what's that average annual household income. And I think something I haven't seen before is one of the questions I got asked as they were using this was, hey, we love it, but how do we see what we filtered on? And I thought, well, that's actually a really good point. How do you know what you filtered on? Because if I come in here and I click here, and then I click on my female demographic, and then I click on those that are self-employed, right? How do I know what I clicked on? So I developed this up here, which allows you to track what you filtered on. And I can actually go into that a little bit later on how I did that, but it's really nifty because what happens is you can go down this wonderful rabbit hole in Tableau of data analysis and insight, but then you forget how you got there. And then you hit the revert button, but then you got to go back, right? Or you do that export to Excel function that we all love. And so I really like this functionality. And I actually know I'll just go ahead and I'll get out of presentation mode and I'll show you how I did that, just for those of you who might want to know. It's really simple. Is you put all the attributes or the dimensions that you want, make them an attribute, right here. And then in the text field, I'll drag this guy over. You actually just put the title of that dimension and then the attribute that follows and add a little spacing, and there you go. Now, it doesn't work with multi-select because it's an attribute function, but if you select just one, and as we showed earlier, then you can see that. So this is a nifty little trick that I came up with. I haven't seen it before, but it's something that I pretty much incorporate into most of my designs now, because when I build these power user dashboards, it's a nice way to say, hey, in case you go down this little rabbit hole, you can now see how you got there. So just an FYI on that one. Let's get back there. And then, so as you may have seen before, I had about 4 slides, I believe, on the first iteration. And let's click out of this guy and out of female. There we go. And I took those 4 iterations and made them into 2 different dashboards. And so the second dashboard was to show the various statuses, or the status of the check-ins of their clients, and to be able to see that over time. And then you get to see the trending as well. And of course, all this is dynamic, so you can click on it. And then you'll notice here, one of the things that they really wanted us to be able to see, if they were able to keep those appointments or not, and red or green, or excuse me, red or blue, if they were not able to. So that was really nice to be able to see that as well. Now, this one again was near and dear to my heart because I do have a passion for giving back, and I do volunteer. And so to be able to go to a nonprofit and offer them some work pro bono to say, hey, these are some of the things that I can do to make sure that you guys are getting kind of the same quality as a Georgia Pacific or an ADP. Now that really meant a lot to me. And so I'm going to go back to our third dashboard, or our third audience member I want to talk to, which are your executives and your C-suite executives. So this particular group, when you're developing for them, they don't tend to have a lot of time, right? They're in meetings all day long. So, and often when they're looking at a report, it's going to be so that they can present it, right? They're going to take a screenshot of it or put it in PowerPoint, because they don't want to present and then someone say, hey, what's that? And then in the conversation, start drilling down, right? So typically they'll take it as a screenshot. So you want to have it in that kind of nice presentation design. And so with that, I had to learn, okay, well, how do I keep it at a high enough level so that they could, get what they need from it, but also incorporate just enough visual to make it pretty. And so this is a dashboard that's going to be for that executive C-suite group that I developed for. And I'll go ahead and put it in presentation mode if I can get this over. Oops, maybe not. There we go. So this is something that I did for a group out in Chicago, search engine optimization. Can get this out the way. There we go. And I've of course changed some of the data just to make sure that it's okay to present. We all know Facebook does not have 0%. But in this one, I wanted to design something that was very clear and concise and to the point. So you've only got 3 very high level metrics, which talk about their overall spend on those ad groups. And then you've got some iconography here where I can see where those come from. So I see computers, mobile devices, and tablets. And then I've got a nice little area chart down here, which gives me, I can see very quickly that we generate our clicks from search mainly, display, and social, right? And so there is some functionality in here. I can come and I can click on these things and I can filter on those things and whatnot. But this was really designed to be a PowerPoint slide, because oftentimes your executives, they don't want to present this in a meeting and then get those conversations, which as an analyst, you're taught to have that, right? You're taught to, in those meetings, to be able to answer those questions on the fly or present it. But an executive group, no, they don't want to answer those questions. They want to be able to say, hey, here's where we are, here's where we're projecting. And so, as you can see, again, there's a very large amount of white space. And this is going to be a PowerPoint slide, which it was used for. There's adequate use of white space. I had a developer once, he was a mechanical engineer by trade, and he had to utilize, in mind, had to utilize the entire dashboard. So there could be no white space from corner to corner. And that was his engineering background. I had to tell him, hey, we're not doing engineering, right? So white space is an element of the dashboard. It's a part of the dashboard. So we want to make sure that we give it room to breathe, right? Because I don't want to overwhelm with this. I want it to be, I want it to be attractive in a sense, right? I want to look at it. I want to be able to let my eyes flow, so you can see the red does call my attention to certain things because those are the low ones, but so does the blue, right? And even then here, the icons are highlighted based on that red and blue paradigm as well. So if I change or filter on something, that color scale would change as well. So there's some nice little features about that as well. Go ahead and go back to the slide here. So I think I finished a little bit sooner than I anticipated. But those are the 3 different areas I wanted to talk to again. So you've got your executive KPI dashboard. You've got your kind of mid-level manager dashboard, which is going to be a mix of your analyst and executive dashboard. And then you've got your analyst / power user dashboard, which is going to be very intensive, meant for drill down, data exportation, and all those things. Yeah, so if you want to keep in touch with me, I'll do this real quick. Scroll on down. I'm really only on LinkedIn. I'm not a social media guy, unfortunately. But you can find me on LinkedIn at Rodney Little Jr. Again, my current client is the IRS. And thank you all for your time. Appreciate it.
Sweet. Thank you, Rod. I think that was really interesting, and it's always interesting to see that, yeah, it's not always graphs, and you don't always need to put charts on there, because some audiences are really interested in the numbers, and that works much better for them and the background they're coming from.
Sure.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions anymore. Are you sticking around in the chat? So if people have, they have questions, they can ask you. Sweet. So if anybody has questions, put them in the chat, and Rod will keep an eye on that to answer those questions. We'll keep going now with